I still hear it sometimes, the sound of the house breathing. It follows me in my dreams, a low, guttural rhythm that I can't escape. Even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of that night. It's etched into my mind like a scar, a constant reminder of the horrors we faced. Let me tell you what happened. Maybe putting it into words will help me make sense of it. Or maybe it'll just make it worse. Either way, here's the truth about the house on Hollow Hill. The dare. It all started with a dare. Isn't that how these stories always begin? A group of friends, a bonfire, and too much bravado. We were sitting in Jake's backyard, the flames casting flickering shadows on our faces, when the topic of the breathing house came up. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone in town had. But I never believed them. Not really. It's just an old, abandoned house, Sarah said, rolling her eyes. People make up stories because they're bored. But what if it's true? Jake countered, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. What if the house really is alive? I shuddered, though I tried to hide it. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural, but the idea of a living house was too much even for me. It's probably just the wind, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Mike, who had been quiet until then, leaned forward, his eyes glinting with mischief. Why don't we find out? Let's spend the night there. The group fell silent. Even Sarah looked uneasy. You're joking, right? She asked. Mike shrugged. What's the worst that could happen? We'll prove once and for all that it's just a creepy old house. After some hesitation, we agreed. It was just a dare, after all. What could possibly go wrong? The arrival. The house loomed before us like a monstrous shadow, its silhouette jagged against the pale moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the ground crunched beneath our feet as we approached. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to keep walking. I couldn't back out now. The front door creaked open with a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Inside, the air was cold and damp, and the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. I shook my head, chalking it up to my imagination. This place is disgusting, Sarah muttered, shining her flashlight around the room. The beam of light revealed broken furniture, shattered glass, and layers of dust that had accumulated over decades. Let's set up in the living room, Jake suggested, gesturing to a large open space near the staircase. We'll stay together and keep the lights on. Nothing's gonna happen. As we unpacked our sleeping bags and snacks, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced around the room, my eyes lingering on the dark corners. Do you guys feel that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Feel what? Mike asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what I meant. Like the house is alive, I said, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I know it sounds crazy, but before I could finish, a low, guttural groan echoed through the room. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, vibrating through the walls and floor. We froze, our eyes wide with fear. What the hell was that? Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. It's just the wind, Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. Old houses make weird noises. But I wasn't so sure. The sound had been too deliberate, too alive. The first night. As the hours passed, we tried to distract ourselves with games and conversation, but the oppressive atmosphere of the house made it impossible to relax. The groaning continued at irregular intervals, growing louder and more intense each time. By midnight, even Sarah was on edge. I can't take this anymore, she said, standing up. I'm going to check out the upstairs. Maybe there's a window open or something. Are you crazy? I asked, grabbing her arm. We should stay together. I'll be fine, she insisted, pulling away. It's just an old house. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed her flashlight and headed for the staircase. We watched in silence as her light disappeared into the darkness above. Minutes passed, and the house fell eerily quiet. Then, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. "Sarah!" I shouted, jumping to my feet. We raced upstairs, our flashlights bouncing wildly as we searched for her. We found her in a small bedroom at the end of the hall. She was crouched in the corner, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror. It touched me," she stammered, pointing to the wall behind her. I shone my flashlight on the wall, but there was nothing there. Just more peeling wallpaper and a faint, almost imperceptible movement, like the rise and fall of a chest. "Let's get out of here," Jake said, his voice shaking. "Now." The house awakens. We didn't make it far. As we hurried down the stairs, the house seemed to come alive around us. The walls pulsed and shifted, the floorboards groaned and creaked, and the air grew thick with the stench of rot. The front door slammed shut, trapping us inside. "What's happening?" Mike shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of sounds. "It's the house," I whispered, my heart racing. "It's alive." The walls began to close in, the ceiling descending as if to crush us. We scrambled to find a way out, but every door and window was sealed shut. The house was feeding on our fear, growing stronger with every passing moment. "We have to break a window," Jake yelled, grabbing a chair and hurling it at the nearest pane of glass. But the window didn't shatter. It absorbed the impact, the glass rippling like water. My mind raced. There had to be a way out. I remembered the stories I'd heard about the house, about the families who had lived there and disappeared without a trace. The house wasn't just alive, it was hungry. The final stand. As the walls closed in, I noticed something. A faint, glowing symbol etched into the floorboards. It was almost hidden beneath the dust, but it pulsed with a soft, golden light. I dropped to my knees, brushing away the dirt to reveal an intricate pattern of lines and curves. "What is that?" Mike asked, his voice filled with desperation. "I don't know," I said, "but it might be our only chance." I pressed my hand against the symbol, and a surge of energy shot through my body. The house let out a deafening roar, the walls recoiling as if in pain. The symbol grew brighter, its light spreading across the room and pushing back the darkness. "Help me," I shouted, and the others joined me, placing their hands on the symbol. Together, we channeled our fear and determination into the light, forcing the house to retreat. With a final, ear-splitting scream, the house fell silent. The walls stopped moving, the air grew still, and the front door creaked open. The aftermath. We stumbled out into the cool night air, our bodies trembling with exhaustion. The house stood behind us, silent and still, as if nothing had happened. "We're never doing that again," Sarah said, her voice shaking. I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching us. As we walked away, I glanced back one last time. In the dim light of the moon, I thought I saw the walls shift, just slightly, as if the house were breathing. Epilogue. We never spoke of that night again. We tried to forget the horrors we had witnessed, but the memory of the breathing house lingered in our minds, a constant reminder that some mysteries were better left unsolved. Years later, I returned to Hollow Hill. The house was still there, its windows dark and its walls crumbling. I stood at the edge of the property, my heart pounding as I remembered the symbol that had saved our lives. As I turned to leave, I heard it. A faint rhythmic sound, like the steady inhale and exhale of breath. I froze, my blood running cold. The house was still alive, waiting for its next victims. And it was hungry.